Paragon is the newest elite specialization for Warrior, and with the beta, we've finally gotten a chance to have a solid look at what it brings to the table as a squad healer. It's the second build to have group alacrity for Warrior, and just from the outset, it's got a much stronger setup as a healer than Bladesworn does, since it overwrites less of core Warrior and adds support tools instead of damaging ones. There's a lot of good things being brought to the table by Paragon, specifically since it's being pitched as a built-to-purpose healer specialization. It validates Heal Warrior as a playstyle through direct developer recognition. Previously, Warrior has had numerous tools added or reworked toward a heal playstyle that made it effective, but rarely any flavor to draw a player to the playstyle. I've had numerous people claim Berserkers aren't meant to heal people, or similar comments to that effect, almost always without any thought for what Berserker or Warrior altogether mean in the setting of Guild Wars 2. It's a high magic setting that lets warriors cast spells to invert damage and cure poison by shouting. Furthermore, giving it the namesake of a Guild Wars 1 profession and reviving that as a heal-focused warrior gives it extra draw for people who want to return to the trappings of Paragon from the first game. Paragon itself sells the fantasy of a battlefield commander very well. The sound design and voice lines help tie down the feeling of a battle motivator, keeping people in the fight. Seeing big pulses of yellow also just makes me happy. I like Warrior's visual design, and Paragon has not disappointed me here. I wanted to break down further into details of what Paragon's actually capable of mechanically. First off, I'm going to start with a bit of background. Also, I was out of town for the first several days of the beta, so that's why this video took a while. First, a history lesson. Heal Warrior builds as a design consideration go back all the way to June 2022, during the first support banner rework. Banners received a second rework in August that year, and a much better one. That summer, Warrior got access to more group barrier, Aegis, stability, resistance, resolution, and quickness. In later updates, quickness and alacrity were tied to Berserker and Bladesworn, and defined heal builds developed, if rudimentary ones. Shouts have existed as support-focused skills since the dawn of the game, and until that summer were Warrior's only group healing. And during Secrets of the Obscure, Warrior gained access to a staff, an overloaded healing tool. Its healing value on its skills is stronger than necessary, its boons are good, it has mobility, a 12-second Aegis cooldown, cone-shaped pull, and a personal block. At the same time Staff was released, 2 trait lines were reworked to improve Heal Warrior. Tactics was given extra protection generation and an alternate trait to trade overall healing for extra boons, condition cleanse, and permanent group stability. Discipline had traits reworked to improve healing received and given, and lengthen Banner's boon output. On top of it, already granting bonus adrenaline and having the weapon swap cooldown to make it even easier to have the right tools ready to react. All of these changes hit core Warrior, so now any Warrior build can heal a group, as long as the build stays out of the way of the core kit. Core Warrior is able to maintain permanent group might, fury, swiftness, regeneration, vigor, protection, Aegis, stability, resolution, and resistance. This is one of the most loaded core kits for raw healing and boons in the whole game. So Warrior has 4 elite specs now, each bringing their own twist on adrenaline and how it's used, as well as a few new skills. Since most of Warrior's healing lies in its core profession tools, the way these elite specs alter them is important. Berserker is by far the best example of them as far as healing goes. Berserker does not overwrite anything on Warrior, save for the trait line it replaces, and offers the Warrior the choice to enter Berserk to get shorter burst cooldowns for increased group healing and boon overcap, or to use tiered bursts for increased value. Specifically, a tier 3 Skullcrack right after a headbutt is a very strong Defiance Break combo, and is valuable at any fight with Defiance bars. Berserker's rage skills also help feed the adrenaline it would otherwise desperately need. It's effectively just Core Warrior with shorter burst cooldowns, and that's all it takes to make a Heal Warrior good. Spellbreaker is limited to Tier 1 bursts. Furthermore, its only way to reduce burst cooldowns is to successfully hit with full counter. It reduces the overall heal utility of the Core Warrior kit. If it had access to quickness or alacrity, it would still be an objectively inferior build to other options because of this. Although I'd still consider it to make use of Winds of Disenchantment sometimes, projectile hate is just hard to come by on Warrior. Bladesworn is the worst offender of the bunch. The Gunsaber is a DPS-oriented kit, and the build loses its weapon swap, meaning a support-oriented weapon set is lost and not replaced. Furthermore, the Elite Spec does not give any healer utility beyond a trait to reduce cooldowns with. It strips you of the core burst skills, leaving it woefully short of group utility and raw healing, and missing out on some boons like Vigor and Swiftness. Paragon is best compared to Spellbreaker. It only has Tier 1 bursts, leaving some utility and healing behind, in exchange for new burst skills called Chants. While Chant of Recuperation is enough to supplant the healing loss, the Mace stun is not regained anywhere else in the kit. At any fight with large Defiance bars, Paragon does not compare well to other healers, either against Berserker or across the other 8 professions. The new skills brought along are also ignorance of the capabilities of Warrior's core skills, often eclipsed by them. Paragon gets 3 new profession bar skills. These bursts, called Chants, each cost 10 adrenaline. When cast, they have an immediate effect and refill motivation, then pulse a passive effect which drains motivation, incentivizing the player to switch between them. Weapon burst skills and weapon 4 and 5 skills also grant motivation. Chants do not have a damaging strike component. Warrior has a lot of traits that trigger when bursts hit enemies specifically, including support-focused ones like marching orders and tactics, meaning that Chants will not interact with Warrior trait lines the way other bursts do. Furthermore, reactivating the same Chant that's already active will not grant alacrity from Feverish Pulse. The Paragon must change between them for alacrity. This means several must be cast at the start of a fight, necessitating fast adrenaline sources like To the Limit. The forced swapping nature of Chants forms a gameplay loop akin to flicking a light switch. Every 11 seconds, the build must swap twice between Chant of Action and Chant of Recuperation to upkeep alacrity. The effects of either aren't so powerful one would want to delay them, so they simply become taxing on the attention of the player. Any momentary value, like trying to gain barrier before damage with Chant of Recuperation, is often ignored to upkeep alacrity instead. Chant of Action grants Might and Fury, 2 boons already well covered by Core Warrior's kit. While it helps ramp slightly faster in the opener, it's effectively irrelevant thereafter, and is mostly used to save on motivation, since it never costs more than 1 per refrain pulse. In essence, the chant itself does nothing after the first 5 seconds of an encounter. Chant of Recuperation is decently designed. Warrior's healing is mostly active, so a passive pulse around the player and an extra shot of barrier is welcomed. It's not particularly inspired, but it's fine. The resistance granted by the skill can be used to replace Banner of Tactics, but for most players who want resistance for their squad, the banner will be more reliable and with better overcap. Chant of Freedom is a group stun break without costing a skill slot. This is nice to have, and since it's not necessary to cast this skill for alacrity, this is a strong point for the build. However, Warrior does already have access to one of the best group stun break skills, Shake It Off, which also cleanses conditions, has 2 charges, and hits a wider area. Awkwardly, Paragon also has access to a group stun-breaking utility skill in a command, so the identity seems a little off. As for Chant of Freedom's Refrain, at 7 motivation and above, the passive grants stability on each pulse, and costs 3 motivation each time, ensuring the build cannot maintain this easily and for long. Considering that Warrior has permanent stability from a tactics trait which Paragon can utilize, this really only serves as momentary backup. Since the stability is attached to the refrain only, the skill is also possible to completely whiff with. the player grants stability a full 3 seconds after the skill is used. If a stun hits the group in that time, after the stun break is cast, but before the stability is granted, the value is wasted. And below 7 motivation, the refrain doesn't do any stability at all, having almost no value for the group. Across the board, the refrains of chance have unimpactful effects when at 6 motivation or below, meaning chance, weapon bursts, and 4 and 5 skills must be regularly used in order to upkeep motivation. This is also an adrenaline-hungry loop, requiring that to be managed as well. While this is likely intended as an anti-AFK measure to keep the design engaging, the end result is a similar input speed as Heal Berserker, a build notorious for having high APM for a healer. It also involves more moving parts, which might put off some prospective heal warrior enjoyers. In essence, chants feel both a little bland in terms of design and concept, where we hit 2 buttons every 11 seconds for mediocre effects, but also taxing on attention due to how motivation is upkept. Commands are a set of utility skills meant to finally bring healing and boons to Warrior. Warrior has spent the past 3 years being showered in group boons and healing skills. These tools are launching in direct competition with core skills that do the same thing on a profession with no missing boons and high healing. Commands have 2 components: an immediate effect on cast, then an echo, which occurs either after 3 seconds have passed or when using a burst skill. With reverberation traded, the echo will trigger twice using either trigger. We Shall Return is a compelling choice on paper, being the only warrior heal slot skill with group healing as opposed to self-only, and cleanses conditions to boot. The healing value is also high, making it pretty desirable. Unfortunately, since Paragon requires additional adrenaline to continue activating chants and core bursts, To the Limit is all but mandatory on most setups and encounters. Furthermore, To the Limit is still capable of healing when traded with Vigorous Shouts, and cleansing when equipped with a Trooper Relic, neither of which are difficult to take. On Your Knees is a damage-only skill, with some cripple condition attached. While this video is focused on Heal Paragon, this skill has very bad damage, on an elite spec with poor damage. This skill needs 2 reworks to get played. Help this thing out. I like the sound design on this one. I want to use it. Never Surrender grants permanent resistance and resolution to your squad. This would be pretty interesting to have if we didn't have access to them from a skill with 5 stability and super speed attached to it already, Banner of Tactics. The skill also breaks stuns for allies, but its cooldown goes from 20 seconds to 30 seconds when doing so. This is compared to Shake It Off, a group stun break with an unconditional 20-second cooldown, 2 charges, a wider effect area, and which also cleanses conditions from allies. Furthermore, just by playing Paragon, your chants have already granted you access to resistance and a group stun break. This skill is obsolete 3 ways, and likely needs to be scrapped in favor of some other effect. Brace Yourselves is a barrier button, and nothing else. Warrior does have 2 other sources of barrier, Warhorn's Call of Valor and Banner of Defense. While this skill brings nothing new necessarily, it's possible that the larger barrier can be worth more than the Aegis and Regeneration on Banner of Defense at some encounters, but usually it won't be, and I won't be using this very much. This could be completely scrapped as well and turn into some other effect, and the build would not miss it greatly. Find Their Weakness is frustrating to think about. With Reverberation traded, 14 might on 1 skill sounds good. A handful of other healers would take that utility skill without much question, but warrior support builds, especially Paragon, are practically drowning in might. They get might from Empower allies, from marching orders, Chant of Action, Valiant Leap, and most poignantly, for Great Justice. For Great Justice is a utility skill that grants 6 might each cast, ramping 12 after both charges are used. It also maintains Group Fury, and heals each cast with Vigorous Shouts, hitting a 600 radius when used. It not only performs the exact same job as Find Their Weakness, but it does that job better. This is especially frustrating because Paragon actually comes with the option to forgo this slot altogether. If you're primarily maintaining Chant of Actions refrain, they can accept a slower might ramp and free up an additional utility slot that would otherwise have gone to for Great Justice. Unfortunately, Find Their Weakness is completely bankrupt. Another core utility performs its job far better, and it's even less necessary on Paragon than on other heal warrior builds. The vulnerability is also not nearly enough of a draw in PvE. Reroll this skill. Perhaps it can find use as a damage-focused command in a similar vein to On Your Knees. We Will Never Yield is more encouraging. It grants the Paragon 3 seconds of a deathless state where health cannot be dropped below 1 point, and it grants allies 2 seconds of that state when the Echo triggers. By casting this and immediately using a burst, you can time it to prevent 5 players from being downed by a big spike of damage. It also grants barrier based on missing health after the effect ends, helping you protect the group afterward. This is a desirable effect, and it's fun to use at raid bosses with high damage attacks that can instantly down players. As has been pointed out by others, however, its timing is very strict. It requires a burst skill to be used, and it competes with the design space of another warrior elite skill, Battle Standard, which can resurrect 5 players from downstate. While preventing downs altogether is better than correcting them, both keep people alive, and Battle Standard is easier to use. A quick side note also, because of the priority of burst skills, queuing into them after using a command is impossible. Attempting to do so will cancel the command skill first, so when trying to trigger an echo quickly, it's possible to completely whiff the skill. This is especially problematic for We Will Never Yield, since it could wipe your squad. So, what can be done? Heal Warrior as a core concept is complete, despite the perception otherwise by the community. It can maintain 10 out of 12 boons permanently, it has healing, cleanse, barrier, crowd control, mobility, tankiness, resurrection, and more. All an elite spec has to do to succeed as a healer is give alacrity and let the rest work. Paragon does not realize this and is trying to help where help is not needed. Commands as they are designed offer nothing new, and in the best of cases offer a different way to do the same thing, and in the worst of cases are an objective downgrade from a core warrior shout or banner skill. Commands as they are designed need a full overhaul. Warrior is missing pieces of group utility that other professions do have access to. Projectile reflects, AoE pulls, even a sort of teleport or portal if one can be given the proper flavor. Granting warriors new tools to use instead of the same ones would go further to draw players to the build. Chants are workable. I like the core concept, but there are tweaks to be made to make them more enjoyable to use. They feel in a way like inverted virtues, granting a passive once the active is used, and I'd like to see that refined. The chants currently have no damaging component and do not trigger burst traits. Both of these would make them feel like bursts properly and improve the builds. Chants only currently give alacrity when switching from one active chant to another. This means that the first chant activated in combat will not grant alacrity, feeling like it's merely being spent for its active and some motivation, while also making a fight opener more hungry for adrenaline. Making the first chant activated in combat trigger alacrity would fix this, as would making all chant activations grant alacrity. That way, swapping between refrains could be done intentionally in response to threats in an encounter rather than purely as a skill rotation. Motivation as a mechanic, I question the current implementation of. Since motivation can be upkept through burst and weapon skills and refilled every so often when hitting chants, it mostly feels like a mechanic ticking in the background asking me not to simply auto-attack, and to press skills like Staff War instead. It's usually not worth paying much attention to, just asking you to mash buttons. Adrenaline on Paragon is scarce, due to having 5 different bursts costing 10 adrenaline each. Reworking a command into an adrenaline source on top of a desirable effect related to chants would be helpful to mitigate the skills to the limit that you would need to make it work. I suggest moving chants away from the burst skill type altogether and leaving tier 3 bursts on Paragon and making motivation a cost paid to activate chants instead of adrenaline. This would allow Heal Paragon the full value of Staff and Mace Bursts, and a damage build to see the full damage of Harrier's Toss on Spear, which scales damage based on Adrenaline tier, helping attach Paragon to Spear like it was in Guild Wars 1. That's about all I had to say on the topic, though. This video took like 3 tries at recording because I'm bad at this. Thanks for watching the good version of it. Have a nice day, and enjoy the rest of the beta. Peace.